So the last video was about exercise 1, and we're going to do exercise 2 now using Adobe Illustrator. So we already placed the template layer. We've already created the squares, and we're ready to move on. Now, we are going to be making just kind of a simple wallpaper sort of thing here. Again, you want to make sure that your show grid is on and snap to grid is on, because we are, in some respects, using the grid here. Looks like we have a double stroke here, so this does align to the grid. I'm just looking to see what kind of things align to the grid. All right, so let's lock exercise 1. I've turned it off as well, and we're now working on exercise 2. So I'm going to go into that layer. Let's see, we probably won't have to deal with any sort of problems with a gradient in the back. So what we're going to do is, for the squares, I'm just going to simply click on the second square in the group. And this is the one that is selected right here. I'm going to fill it with this light blue. That does need to be stroked with black. So let's go ahead and put a black stroke on that. You could also copy and paste this into the layer if you wanted to, but that's entirely up to you. Either way is fine with me. So I'm going to lock the squares layer, and it should be behind the other layers, which it is. But my template now doesn't show up. So we may have to do that. Maybe have been a little premature. So I'm going to turn off that square, and we're going to turn that on again later. So the template layer is here, exercise 2 layers up there. We want to be on exercise 2 layer. I'm going to start from the center out here, and this may, it does look like it snaps to the grid to some point, but some places it does not. So we may have to turn snap to grid on and off. And it really would be good to memorize my keyboard shortcuts on this. High grid is control and quotation, snap to grid, shift control quotation. Now I probably will go back and forth to using view to do this versus keyboard shortcuts, because when I use my keyboard shortcuts, people oftentimes don't realize what I'm doing. All right, so let's build this little sort of, looks almost like a little funky pot thing. Let's grab our rounded rectangle for that. Now I usually do draw from the center out and holding down the Alt key. And I don't necessarily hold on the Shift key for this. Let's fill this with none. And I'll get him roughly in position. We may have to use the scale tool or the, to pull him so he's roughly the size he needs to be. I think I will pull that in one on both sides. And we'll have to modify this as we work on it. So it's not perfectly snapping to the grid. We can always sample the color of purple here. And the only problem with that is you can't see the underlying piece. So I'm gonna currently not have it filled with anything. I want to get the shape right. So we're going to click on the shape. And let's make sure all the layers are locked that need to be locked. The template layer needs to be locked and the squares are locked. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and over one. Again, up one, over one. Same thing with this edge here. This is going to go up 2 and over 2. This is the reason why I'm using snap to grid, is I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing to one side happens also to the other. This one appears as if, you know what? I'll get this roughly in shape, and then we'll I don't want to get too far along on this. Then we'll draw the other parts too. So it looks like I have a round rectangle here, another one here, and I need to merge them and play with them. So I think I'll go ahead and get those rounded rectangles going. And again, drawing from the center out, Alt click, drag. And in this case, I'm going to use my direct selection tool and pull out the corners so the radiuses are fairly tight. And I'm going to resize this so it pull it down so it overlaps. And with snap to on, it should be pretty much to the center. I think I'll just duplicate this one by holding down the Alt key. Oops, wrong one, excuse me. Click on this guy, hold down the Alt key and Shift and drag it down below. Something doesn't seem quite square about this, so let's do a Control Z a couple times. Something seemed to have happened here. Sometimes, there we go, let's try that again. It looked like there was a slight angle on that, so I wasn't real happy with what was going on. Yeah, that's working out better. For some reason, the accuracy is hit or miss today. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and merge these shapes. Shift click on the 3 shapes that I have. And I can either do this through Pathfinder or through using the shape builder. When I have more than 2 shapes, I typically will go through the Pathfinder and merge those together. I will have to convert this anchor point here on the corner to a curve. So I'm going to click and drag on each one of those, get that taken care of. And then I'm going to move each of these anchor points up one segment. There we go. Works out pretty well. Looks like we could maybe pinch that up in a bit more. You know what? I'm not real happy with that. So let's grab this guy, move him in. He needs to be a curve too. So I'm going to move this guy in. Same thing here. Getting this shape perfect is going to be a little challenging. But you know, it's just part of it. So goodness. All right, we're going to move them back and then we're going to convert them to curves. Oh, heavens to Betsy. There we go. That's going to be a little bit better. Convert these to curved anchor points. Now we could draw half of this and duplicate it. Good heavens. But you know, we're just going to work from the top down here. Now, if I am not exactly aligned to the way it needs to be aligned here, let's see, I'll pull this in once, pull this in once. There we go, that's better. And keep in mind that this purple won't have a stroke on it. So, you know, we're kind of working. In fact, let's go ahead and make the stroke really thin. That way it's not so confusing. There we go. And I probably want to pull this down just a smidge, but not quite as much as what snapping to the grid is giving. Okay, now same thing here. I'm going to go in and modify this piece. Now, I'm going to have to turn off snap to grid, or maybe I'll just leave the grid on and I'll just go with what the grid has given me. I'm going to have to do the same thing down here where I'm going to pull, convert this also to a corner point and move it. So if I move it up, it's really not snapping to the grid properly. So it looks better when it's up here. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up and over one. I'm looking for basically something similar to what we have here. Again, this is not exactly snapping to the grid. We can turn off snap to grid for just a moment, and we can go in and select the points that we need to move and just move them around a little bit here and there. So I'm going to grab these 2 here, move them down. I'm going to grab this here, move it in one. I'm just using the arrow on the keyboard. And then grab these 4 down here, move them up one. And you know, it's getting closer. It's not perfect though, is it? And if you have to move something, make sure you are holding the shift key down when you're moving stuff, just so it stays in line. All right, so that's pretty close. Not perfect, but pretty close. I'll also go ahead and make this little circle in the center. Again, it doesn't align to necessarily the grid, so I'm going to go for the center, hold up my Alt or Option key, better use the right tool for the job, which would be the ellipse. Hold the Alt or Option key, draw from the center out. There we go. Not real happy with what's going on there. So there's 2 anchor points there too. So let's pull that in one. Same thing here. We're going to pull these in one. And now I can grab this pull point here. And you can use the arrow key, I think, on those too. So let's try that. No, it doesn't work. You do have to pull it. So I'll just pull it to the next visible point, holding down the shift key. Same thing over here. Next visible grid line. So I'm just trying to clean this up just a little bit. Not real happy with the accuracy or lack of accuracy. So, you know, again, we can just say close enough, right? Really close. It's not willing to give it up though. This one's a bigger problem than I thought. This is why use the grid if we don't have anything aligned to it, right? All right, so we have this. Looks like we have a couple little other things that need to be fixed up here. This could come in just a smidge, and so could the other one. So we're going to see if just using the arrow key is going to do the trick. I actually may delete those anchor points. Let's see what happens if we delete those. Well, I may be barking up the wrong tree, but not too bad. Yeah, we'll just delete those anchor points. Again, you know, I can't leave it alone, so I'm going to hold down the shift key while I move them so they stay in line. All right, so we've got this pulled together. By the way, I should hit Control S because I haven't saved in a while. So make sure you save often. Now, this little guy is going to be filled with purple and stroked with nothing. This guy I'm going to fill with white for now and stroke with none. We do need to have this punched through. Now I'm going to turn off the template layer for just a second. We need to have that punched through the other piece because that's transparent. So what I'm going to do is hold down the shift key, make sure both of these are selected. So I selected this oval and the shape. We need to create a window through this. Now I'm going to turn on the squares so you can actually see whether or not this pops through. The squares are locked. So we're going to go to Object and we're going to make a compound path. And that usually punches through there. If it doesn't punch through there, you can always use Pathfinder to try to subtract or whatever. Okay, so that's a compound path. Now we know that's showing through. Let's turn the template layer back on. Now this object has multiple paths on it. It has a yellow path and a thin black path. So we're going to go a stroke. We're going to add a stroke to this, fairly thick one, and we're going to align it to the exterior of the shape. And this would be probably a 1 point, and this is going to be yellow. Now there's another stroke on here, and that's black. And to add 2 strokes, you have to use the Appearances panel. So I went to Window Appearance. I'm going to duplicate the original stroke by clicking on it and dragging it to the plus sign. And this stroke is going to be behind the other stroke. And so I'm going to use this second one here. We're going to make this stroke black. And we're going to increase it a little bit. Oops. So it's definitely not 2 points. It's not 1 point. So let's do 1.25 and see what happens there. And that's about right. So 1.25. I like that. That looks pretty good. Now, what's happening down here? Do we still have any, something showing through? Barely. So I really need to make sure that what I've done works well and looks similar to the template. So let's turn this off. Okay, so we do have a problem. I may have to hit Control Z a number of times, or I suppose I could do a larger circle and compound path it. So this circle isn't quite right. It seemed to be the right size, but when I aligned the stroke to the exterior, we created some problems. So Control Z, right? What a pain. Guys, I learn, I make mistakes, you guys make mistakes, we all make mistakes. So this path that was created and compounded through there, it needed to be larger. So I'm going to turn on the template again, need to be much larger. Let's turn off the squares here. And going to fill this with none right now because I got to figure out this shape. So this shape needs to be much larger. So we're going to use a scale tool and we're going to scale from the center out, holding down the Alt key. So it probably needs to be as wide as the opening. That's my guess now. Again, sorry guys, you know, sometimes I assume one thing and it's not correct. So you guys probably go through the same kind of problems on your pieces. So maybe it's good to see that I'm not perfect, right? I'm going to fill this path again with purple. And sorry about the redo. We are going to punch this hole through, holding down the Shift key, grabbing both of them. You can also just use the shape builder and hold down the Alt key. That'll be good too. And let's see what this will give us. So we're going to go ahead and put a stroke on it, a 1-point stroke of yellow. We're going to align that stroke to the exterior. This is coming along much nicer. Oops, stroke of yellow. And then we are going to add another stroke by using the appearances panel. Okay, nothing like a little practice there. Duplicate the stroke like we did before. Go to the bottom stroke, make it thicker, make it black. But instead of 2-point, we will have to manually highlight that and type in 1.25. And there we are. That looks a lot better than what it did before. It was really squeezing in there. So when you have a cutout out of something and it has strokes on it, that cutout has to be bigger, accommodating, you know, keeping in mind that you have to accommodate for the stroke width. Okay, so we just learned a little lesson there. And I relearned the lesson. I like to relearn lessons, I guess. I should know, but I can't remember everything, you know? So we're going to turn off the squares layer for just a moment, turn back on the template layer, and we're going to work with the next few shapes here. The hardest shape was that center shape. We might turn Snap to back on, and this would be an oval. So we're going to go roughly to the center of that oval, hold the Alt key, and draw it out. This does have some modification to it. Again, this will have a stroke on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this anchor point down, this one up. And we'll, let me make the stroke really thin because we really just, 0.25. Really just looking for the crust of what I am doing with this shape. So I'm going to pull this point down a little bit, maybe a couple of points down. It's actually a handle, not a point. Same thing here. So I'm having to edit these handles and really tighten this guy up. And this is all with Snap 2 on, Snap 2 guides. That helps a lot because it keeps us in perfect geometry, more or less. I'm gonna pull that up one, pull this down one. No, we'll leave that the way it was. Okay, we'll just fill that with purple. And then we'll do the same thing where we apply the same stroke. The cool thing about this is you've already done this once, so you can use this eyedropper tool and sample what this guy is all about. Oh no, it didn't grab the appearance. Gosh darn it. So guess what? We're going to have to go in and we're going to have to do the 1-point stroke. Well, you would think it would grab it its appearance. 1 point of yellow stroke on the exterior of the piece. And that is aligned to the outside. Go back into appearances. That kind of sucks that we have to do this twice. Duplicate the stroke, and the one on the bottom will be 1.25, and it will be black. There we go. Now this guy needs to be sent to the back of the other guy, so we're going to just go to the layers panel and move it underneath it. Now, if we have to, we can always turn off Snap to Grid. And I'm going to click this guy and just arrow him up at least one arrow notch just to get this away from the edge of that. The purple shouldn't, there should be a little bit yellow between the two shapes. Now I am going to duplicate this shape and I will turn back on Snap to Grid. I will duplicate the shape by Alt click and drag and hold down the Shift key. Zoom out a little bit. And that was Alt click, drag and Shift. Get him in position. Turn off the snap to grids. Let's move him up one. Turn off snap to grid. And then just use the arrow key, move him down one, just so it'll be equal to what's going on at the top. These need to be equal. All right. Now we're ready to move on to doing these dots. The dots, those are easy. Dots and lines are pretty easy. So let's go ahead and put some lines in here. We got one line here. Hold down the Shift key while you're popping it in there. This line is supposed to be purple. So let's use the same color of purple. I would assume the purple is right here. So I typically oftentimes use the default colors for these. And then we're going to duplicate this line by clicking on it, hold down the Alt and Shift and drag it to the other side. And here we definitely want snap to grid on. So we're going to make sure those are snapped into the grid so they're perfectly aligned. So we have two lines in this graphic, purple lines. So we put those on there. If we turn off the template, you'll see they're in there. About 1 point is fine. Now on these dots, normally what I do is I'll draw half of one side, or I'll draw half of this. I'll draw one side of these dots and I'll duplicate them and flip them over. So that's what we're going to do here. Excuse me. Typically you would want snap to grid on, assuming these align to the grid. These are close to aligning to the grid, but not perfect again. I'm not sure what's going on with this grid. Maybe if I were to, instead of do 30/2 of an inch, let's try this. Let's go to preferences. Let's go to units, grids and guides, and let's multiply this by 2. So let's do 64. That's a lot of grid lines, but maybe it'll help me get things more aligned to the center. So I'm going to use the ellipse tool, go roughly to the center of this and click and drag out. And this is a purple stroked object. So let's, and it's filled with purple stroke with yellow fill. So let's get the fill in there of yellow. And we may have to align that to the outside, which it currently is not. There we go. And that 64 division is working out pretty well. You just got to zoom way in when you're working on stuff. We're also going to draw a circle over here. Oh gosh, this doesn't align. Oh man, I don't want to do 127 grid lines. I will if I have to, but geez. Okay, we're going to do this. And we're going to use an orange. Move this over and see what I have here. Purple stroke, orange fill. So we're going to grab this fill and make this orange. I'm going to pop it in position. And I'm not going to worry about it being exactly on the same position because I like using the grid, and I'm going to stick with this grid on this. Now, I guess this really is a quadrant thing. So I only have to do one quadrant because this has perfect radial symmetry as far as, you have the same circles in the same position, just mirrored on each of the quadrants. Oops, I'm going to have to take a moment. My battery is low, so let's get things changed up here. Just give me just a second. Okay, got the battery back going on. Let's get kind of plug this in. Let's move this guy by copying him, Alt click drag and move him over to the area where he needs to go. Same thing here. And this would be on a PC, Option click drag. Alt click drag or Option click drag, get that. I'm gonna go ahead and have it snap to the grid. We also have one of these here. And that one is filled with green, a light green, and stroked with a dark green. Okay. Now, We'll also grab this circle and Alt click drag it to the middle, and that is filled with an orange. Same orange as up here, so we just probably should just sample that. Huh. Doesn't want to sample. Second orange, there we go. Purple, yeah. All right, I'm going to turn off my template layer just to see how things are going. Looks pretty good. I'm not missing anything. Now, we are going to, oh, I have one more little square or circle right here. That should be centered. So I'm going to Alt click drag and it should be centered. There we go. So we have all these circles in this quadrant done. Here, 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 and here. Now, what we can do is we can copy those and we'll just reflect them. And we'll tell it to reflect and tell it to copy. Now, when I do this, I do typically want to have transform on this. We'll put it on the center right now on the reference point. Let's see if that works. It may need to be on the bottom center actually, because I'm going to reflect this down. So let's put this bottom center. We want it reflected on center down. We're going to go to Object, Transform. We want to reflect this. Now it looks like it's not doing the reflection from the bottom down. That's a bummer. Well, we hit copy and maybe hit Control G so you don't lose them. And they're grouped. And as you pull them down, hold down the Shift key. Oops, I guess I reflected it vertically, excuse me, and pop those in position. So I just mirrored those. I thought I was going to go from top down, but I wasn't paying attention. So we just mirrored those and put them across. Now, what I should have done is I should have grouped all of those before I even mirrored them. So I'm going to hit Control Z and I'm going to group them before I reflect them because I'm going to have to do this 4 times and I don't want to have to go and shift click on those again. Sometimes it's quicker to undo something and then go back and group it than it is to try to group them afterwards. So again, we're going to go back to Object, Transform, and Reflect. And we're going to hit Copy, and then we're going to pop this into the position it needs to be popped into. Now I'm going to grab all these top objects, but before I do, I'm going to lock or turn off maybe the lines. There we go. And I'm going to grab all of those. I can group them as well. And I will flip those. So again, transform, reflect, and now it would be horizontal. Hit copy. And you want those to align perfectly to the original ones. So I'm holding down the Shift key while I'm moving them. So there they are. All those are in the right position. Let's turn back on the other objects. Also turn on the template layer. This is almost done. Let's turn off the grids for just a moment because I'm having a hard time seeing stuff. Hide grid. Now, if I turn off the template, you'll see that we are missing the squares. So I'm going to turn on the squares. There we go. Those are fine. This thing's pretty much done. And we're ready to move on to the next exercise. But that'll be next week. So guys, I'm sorry this didn't run as smoothly as I hoped with the Snap to Grid stuff. But you know, on these circles, I went ahead and just snapped it to the grid anyway and made it really close to where they originally were. If you find that these are a little too thick, which I do feel a little too thick, I can lock everything in here, including those squares. Grab these circles and just go in here to their weights, and maybe this is a 0.75, I don't know. It just seems a little thick. So you may want to thin those down just a little bit. That looks a lot better. Seems a little too thick. So I'm going to save this, and you will upload this assignment through, you don't have to make a JPEG or anything. You don't have to package it, but you will upload this through the assignment link by clicking on Start Assignment, choose File, and then you're going to grab your EX12 file, open it, hit Submit, and it's done. Okay. Now, all told, guys, when I originally created all 1 through 10 of these, it took me about 45 minutes to create them. It takes a lot longer to teach about it than it does to just work when if you're a professional and you've done Illustrator for years, it takes, minutes instead of hours. So these videos take a little time. I hope you find them useful. You definitely want to follow along with them, because if you don't, you may totally be off on these things. Again, I do want you to work on that gradient mesh a little bit better on this first one. Take some time to get that to feel a little bit better. Mine's a little off yet still. I need to keep playing around with it. But yeah, you want these things to be as clean and as accurate as possible. All right, thank you guys, and we'll have some more exercises for you later.